Hi, I'm Julie and I run One of a Kind Furniture Studio. I paint old furniture using chalk paint maker and emulsion and turn old furniture into something new and exciting. I started the business 2.5 years ago after finishing my teaching degree and decided that having 2 young children, it wasn't right to go into teaching full-time when I had the 2 children at home. So here I am today and I'm going to show you how to use the chalk paint maker effectively. The first thing you need to do when painting any piece of furniture is to prep it first. A lot of people get a bit sidetracked with whether or not they should or shouldn't. If in doubt, prep it anyway and you're going to end up with a better finish. First thing you need to do is to give it a light sand. This chair is obviously dark wood and I'm going to give it a sand just to give it a little bit of a key and get rid of the little bit of varnish that's already on there. You don't need to worry too much when sanding it, making sure that you've got every single piece off. What you want it to do is you want the paint to actually grip to the wood rather than to the varnish, because if you don't prep it first, then you end up with paint chipping off quite easily. When you are sanding, it's always best to go with the grain of the wood. If you don't go with the grain of the wood, even when you've painted over the furniture, you still get scratches and it doesn't look quite as nice. And leave a nice finish. Also, when you're sanding, if you make sure you sand the edges of whatever the piece of furniture is that you're doing, or else, again, the paint doesn't stick to it as well. It is sometimes a good idea to wear gloves when using sandpaper, because you end up with sore fingers otherwise. It's also important to make sure that you get into all of the edges and do down the sides of the wood as well, and underneath when you have a chair or something like this. When sanding, it can be tedious, but if you make sure you do it effectively, then it makes the painting so much easier in the end. Once you're happy that you've finished sanding everywhere, you then put the sandpaper down and take a cloth and dust it down to get rid of all of the excess. This can be done using sugar soap and water, because then it gets off any grease that may still be hanging around on the furniture. Make sure you sand underneath, or rub underneath where you've sanded rather, to get all the excess off underneath as well. Once you're happy that that's clean and dusted, you then go on to make your chalk paint using the chalk paint maker. For this, we use 2 parts emulsion to 1 part chalk paint maker. Always make sure you shake it first. Doesn't matter which way around you put the chalk paint maker in first or whether you put the emulsion in first. Take the second pot. The more precise you are with the measurements, the better the effect will be with the paint. Lids back on because we don't want them drying out. And then you mix it together. The good thing about the chalk paint maker is you can use any emulsion as long as it's matte finish, and you can make as little or as much of it as you want to. Make sure all of the chalk paint maker is mixed in thoroughly. And there we have it, ready to go. Now that we've sanded and dusted the chair, I'm using chalk paint maker and emulsion. There are times when you would use a stain blocker or you would prime the chair or the piece of furniture that you're painting to block out any stains that may possibly come through. However, I'm not doing that today purely because it's a dark coloured paint that I'm using, so it won't show through anyway. If you have a very knotty piece of timber that you're painting, it's best to use a shellac or a stain blocker. When applying the paint, it's always best to make sure you go in the same direction, just like when sanding. And when you get to the corners, make sure you get in to the corners and the edges, but always go back over it and brush it in the same direction as the grain of the wood. Try and keep the paint the same thickness all the way over as you're painting it. If you try to layer it up too quick and too thick, then you have problems at the end when varnishing it or lacquering it or waxing it, whichever you decide to do. And it tends to come off and flake off a little bit easier. Some people prefer to paint and put thicker coats on. However, it looks more professional and better quality if you apply thinner coats and a number of them. If you also remember that you have edges, and every now and again use the edge of your paintbrush to get rid of any excess paint that might build up. With the Polyvine chalk paint maker, you tend to get a very good coverage and consistency with the paint. There's no drag when painting. Sometimes when you're painting you can get bubbly bits. With the chalk paint maker, you don't tend to get that. It's smoother and leaves a nice overall finish. Once you're sure that the chair's completely dry, we then give it a second coat. In between coats of paint, I like to make sure I give it a light sand. So that it gives it more of a flat finish and a smooth finish once it's lacquered. Again, always remember to go with the original direction that you've painted it in the first time. And if you need to go the opposite way, always smooth it off. When I'm painting my furniture, I like it to look like it hasn't been painted. So I try to get it to look as natural as possible. The smoother and more even that you put the paint on, the nicer the finish in the end. Now that we've finished the second coat on the chair, we're now going to protect it. We have a number of different choices when we're protecting the chair. We've got the satin finish, we've got a dead flat finish. We have a chalk paint waxer or a wax finish varnish. For this time we're going to use the wax finish varnish. One thing to remember when you use them is not to shake the bottle and add air into the product. I like to use the dead flat finish when I'm painting my furniture. So I don't like it to look shiny. Again, when you're lacquering it and protecting it, always go in the same direction as what you've painted in. As I've said, this is a dead flat finish. But if you're doing, for instance, a tabletop and it's going to get a lot of hard wear and tear, and wine glasses and dinner plates, hot cups, always protect it with a satin finish first. And then once it's dried, go over the top of it with a dead flat finish. Remember to try and keep a consistent amount of varnish on the brush. Always make sure you go around the edges to make sure you get rid of all of the excess varnish. One thing to remember is to make sure that you do the underneath of any piece of furniture that you're doing, as this can often get forgotten as it's not something that the eye can see.